I guess we're back with the next one of Who Cares? And begin. Chapter 37, Dance Battle. Within minutes, everyone was enjoying the conga line. Even Dib, Gretchen, and I had joined and were having a great time. My hands were on the waist of some kid, Gretchen's hands were on my waist, and Dib was holding Gretchen's waist. I have to say, I enjoyed just about everything that happened that night, but the conga line was my favorite moment. In that moment, I wasn't a delusional feral wolf child. Zim wasn't a weird kid who may or may not be an alien. Julian wasn't the most popular boy in school. Gretchen wasn't awkward. Dib wasn't insane or fighting with Zim. The whole school was just doing this thing together, and the whole school was enjoying it. Then it happened. The song ended and the new one started up. The salsa number. I gasped and released the person in front of me. I rushed to the front of the line to find my partner, passing Julian, who was searching for his purple-haired partner. I found Zim being grossed out by all the touching of the other humans. "Zim!" I grabbed his hands. "Salsa dance starting, come on!" I dragged him out to the dance floor and we started dancing like we had practiced. It was unbelievable how easily Zim managed to pick up dancing. It took me so much practice, but I had such a good teacher. It was like when Mother taught me how to hunt small animals, and then I had to catch them on my own. We started off dancing the basic steps, but got more carefree and wild as the song went on. Julian and Gaz were dancing a few feet away from us. Well, Julian was pretty much just dancing around Gaz, but still, Julian was the only one besides the two of us who was dancing with any sort of spice. Everyone else was just doing basic dancing and nothing else. The boy was my first ever me-sized dance partner, after all. Zim twirled me around and I twirled him again and again. We did dips, and you'd think my hips weren't attached to my body. Suddenly, about 3 heartbeats into the song, Dib and Gretchen were beside us, and they were dancing. Only, Dib's focus wasn't on Gretchen at all, but instead he was glaring at Zim and I. Gretchen was pretty much being dragged around like a living doll. It wasn't too different from how Julian was dancing with Gaz, but he at least was being gentle. Zim noticed Dib and returned his glares. Dib deepened his glare before smirking as he started twirling Gretchen again and again against her will. "Whoa, whoa!" I heard Gretchen's natural response to the forced movement. Zim's face grew smug and he twirled me twice as fast and twice as many times as Gretchen. Then he grabbed me and ended with a dip while smiling at Dib. And so it had begun, the dance battle of the year. Dib always had something to throw, but Zim and I always outdid him in everything. It didn't take long for me to actually be doing our moves voluntarily, but poor Gretchen was still subjected to whatever Dib decided. If Dib dipped Gretchen, we dipped better and with more flexibility. Sometimes I even dipped Zim. Our twirls were faster and less clumsily done. They ended with less dizziness for both of us, as I would also twirl Zim. Even if she wanted to, I don't think that Gretchen could even come close to rivaling my hip action. However, Dib did his hip bumps and thrusts much more in sync with the music than Zim could, and this infuriated my mate. By now, dozens of other children had gathered around us and were watching the loophole in fighting that the two boys had made. I told them they couldn't fight, but I never said they couldn't fight through dance. Zim was becoming enraged by Dib's superior hip movements, and so he did something we'd never practiced, or that I had even shown him. Without warning, he lifted me from my feet and held me above his head. The crowd cheered in amazement, but Dib only became irate, and he lifted Gretchen above his head. Now Zim and Dib stood facing each other with their partners above their heads. Alejandro had taught me how to control my body when being held in the air, but Gretchen had never received such instructions, and I could see that she was in a pain that Dib would not notice. Then Zim lowered me before tossing me in the air, where I twirled horizontally and landed in his arms again. I landed in my mate's arms bridal style, where I jumped out of his arms. Dib tried to do the same tossing trick with Gretchen, but you can probably guess what happened. Gretchen certainly did not twirl in the air, but instead flopped like a fish out of water. Dib made the mistake of keeping his eyes on us instead of his victim. Instead of falling into his arms, Gretchen fell on top of Dib's head. She was lucky he broke her fall, but he didn't see it coming, and they were both on the ground. While this was happening, I wrapped my legs around Zim's waist and hung there. Zim's hands held mine as we spun in circles while the crowd cheered. Dib and Gretchen were certainly out of the battle, but that didn't stop us from dancing like pros. I jumped from Zim's hips and went straight into a drop slash. I slid completely through Zim's legs, and then he pulled me out and onto my feet. I twirled one more time, and then Zim dipped me with my leg in the air. He pulled me to my feet, and we ended with a yo-yo move, where I spun into his arms, and the song ended. The music stopped, and the school was cheering, but we weren't paying attention. I was still in Zim's arms, staring into his eyes with our foreheads touching. The next song that came on happened to be a beautiful, slow song. I turned in place and draped my arms around Zim's shoulders while he held my waist. You couldn't slide a leaf between us, our torsos were so close. I didn't see or hear anything else in the world but my lovemate's eyes and the classic song playing behind us. We turned in slow circles while gazing into each other's eyes, our heads still touching. As we held one another as closely as physically possible, I could hear and feel the low vibrations of Zim's purrs. I shut my eyes and just listened. Zim's head soon drifted, but not away from me. He only shifted so that his lips were beside my ear, and he whispered, "I love you, my she-wolf." I moved my lips to where his ears would be if he were human, and whispered back, "I love you, my Erkin." And I meant it. I did love him, and I knew he meant it too. We certainly didn't just say it because we thought we were supposed to. Quite the opposite, really. We said it because we were finally free to say it. It was incredible. We were incredible. Our entire relationship was simply incredible. He was a creature who had never experienced love before, and didn't even know that he could. I was a creature that understood love better than I understood anything else. The love I received from my mother, father, and the rest of the pack was more extraordinary than I could ever have received from any humans. It wasn't just how much they loved me, but the fact that they loved me at all. They chose to love me. They chose to love a completely different species. They could have left me to die, or eaten me, or anything else, but they chose to love me as if I was truly one of them. Whoever my birth parents were, they certainly didn't choose to love me. I never even considered them as my real parents, since they obviously bore the wrong child with the wrong species. I could never consider anybody but my wolf mother and father as my parents, but especially my mother. The point is that I know love, and I certainly know interspecies love. Nobody knows interspecies love quite like I do, and this, right here, was interspecies love. Even after the song ended, we didn't want to separate from our embrace. We continued holding each other for 3 whole songs while everyone else danced around us. Eventually we pulled away and made our way back to the table with our group. Everyone was there except for Dib, who was missing. I looked around before asking, "Where Dib at?" "He's been in the bathroom for 2 songs now," Gaz told us. "And there he stayed the entire night. Such a sore loser. Just because you lost a dance battle and dropped your date doesn't mean you have to ditch the poor girl." Zim and I danced a few other times that night. We danced some more casual dances, including the hip-hop that I'd taught him. And we danced a couple more slow dances too, of course. Who would have thought Zim would be so good at dancing when he'd never even heard of dancing until 5 days ago? Not only that, but he ended up loving the activity that most human boys don't even enjoy. I did love that night with my mate. I think even Gaz was starting to enjoy herself once Julian started acting less like his father and more like, well, himself. We were all having a grand time except poor Gretchen. Zim and I were too entranced with each other that night for me to really do anything for Gretchen. Our night of magic was her night of misery. I knew I had broken my promise to stick by her side all night. Huh? Oh, it's over. Well, good. I hope you all hated it. Bye.